Let me start by talking about what's happening right now, because in the United States, most of the country has either forgotten about the pandemic, or they no longer cared about the pandemic, or they're kind of over it, where now it's like, okay, things are finally going back to normal, enough's enough, and now it's time to start living life again. For most of the country, that's what people were seeing. Like our office is here in Michigan, and I'll be honest, I kind of forgot that this pandemic was happening. No one has a mask requirement, no one really wears a mask anymore, and so it was just one of those things where this pandemic is something you just live with, and people for the most part forgot about this pandemic or they stopped caring about it. And then during the week of Thanksgiving and the week before Thanksgiving, I was in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, it's completely different. Now in Las Vegas, everything was packed. I mean, there was tons and tons of people in Vegas, but they had very, very, very strict mask requirements. Now I'm over here in Vegas and I didn't bring any of my special masks because I got a special mask that I put on, that way it can go over my turban, but I forgot about it because I didn't wear a mask in Michigan. I even forgot to bring my mask to the airport because I hadn't worn a mask in so long, because nobody wears masks where I live. So it was just kind of one of those things where I forgot about it, and so I had to improvise. My wife had 2 bobby pins on her, and I took these bobby pins, put them on the edge of the mask, the loops, and I tied them here to the back of my turban and into my hair over here, and so that's how I was able to wear a mask. But even in Vegas, like, everybody was super strict on the mask requirement, and it was a big surprise for me because I just hadn't worn a mask in so long. But ever since Thanksgiving, I've been hearing people get worried about this virus again. Now this is kind of as a shock because everyone thought that this virus was done. The pandemic was done. We're vaccinated. We have masks. We understand how to control it. But it looks like people are starting to get worried again, just from what I've seen. Now, part of this naturally has to do with the fact that there's a new variant, because everything that had to do with the old pandemic, the old variants, kind of became old news. People understood it, and they no longer really cared about it because they heard about it again and again and again and again and again. Now you have this new variant, and it gives the media something new to talk about, and it has got people's interest again. I mean, Dr. Fauci has come out, and he said that this virus is something that we need to be concerned about. This new variant is something we need to be really concerned about, and we're not going into lockdown yet, but it may be something we need to consider if things get bad again. So he says that we don't need to be worried about lockdowns yet, but just the fact that he mentioned the word lockdowns has people naturally worried about it again, because we all remember what happened in 2020, and we remember the restrictions that we saw through 2021 as well. This new virus variant, which kind of sounds like a transformer, was originally discovered in South Africa, and then has traveled to a couple other countries because people from South Africa who were contagious traveled to a different country, and so this is causing the slight spread of this new variant. And that's why you've seen all these travel bans, which I'll get into in just a second. But this is why people are getting worried, because they don't understand this new variant yet, and it's already starting to spread. And so people and countries are trying to contain the spread while they try to understand what this new variant is. And this brings me to number 2, understanding the markets. Because as soon as the talk of this virus, and as soon as the talk of this new variant hit the mainstream news, people started to panic. You saw it in the stock market. Black Friday was not only Black Friday for retailers, but it was also Black Friday for investors, because we saw the market drop by the biggest amount in all of 2021. Now clearly this was an emotional sell-off. I mean, there had been no economic impact yet of this new variant, but people were just worried, because what happens if we see a repeat of 2020? What happens if we see lockdowns again? What happens if we see an economic slowdown again? What if all these things happen? This could be bad. And so people got worried and they started cashing out, and this made people want to now sell their stocks, which caused a little bit of a panic and that little kind of minor crash on Black Friday. But then you saw the market rebound on Monday, as soon as the market opened up the week after Thanksgiving. I talked about this a lot when the 2020 pandemic and crash was initially starting, but the stock market and the economy are similar but different. The economy is how many jobs are there? How are businesses performing? Do people actually have jobs? And the stock market is a place where people go to bet their money based off of what they think will happen in the economy in the future. So they're similar, but they're not directly related. Yes, they are similar. The stock market has to have some sort of resemblance to the economy, but it doesn't mean that the stock market and the economy move one-on-one. They don't have to move linearly. They don't move linearly. So the stock market is a place where people go to bet their money based off of what they think is going to happen in the economy, and when people get worried, well, then they start to panic, and that can cause more wild swings in the stock market, which don't always directly translate to the economy. So you need to understand the difference between the market and the economy before you start to make any decisions with your money, because if you start to think that, oh my God, the stock market's going down, which means the economy's crashing, well, you really need to understand what you're doing before you start to put your money to work, because now you're going to be the one that's losing money while somebody else gets to come in and buy investments at a discounted price because you're selling at a loss. Markets around the world were hit pretty hard as soon as talks of this new variant started hitting the mainstream. And so naturally people are worried because they don't know what this means. We don't know if this variant is going to be nothing or if it's going to be way worse than the previous variants. We don't know exactly yet. And so people were naturally worried, which is one of the reasons why they started to pull out. This is where it really pays to do your research and to be financially educated, because if you have some sort of stocks or assets that you want to invest in, and you've already done the research, you know which companies, you know which assets, you know which securities you want to own, and you're just waiting for a dip, and you see something like this Black Friday pullback, this could be the perfect opportunity for you to come in and buy, because this virus does give a lot of volatility in the market. So what you want to do, and I'll get more into the strategy of how to do this when I go over the what do you need to be doing right now with your money, but this is where you have to be smart and you have to be doing your research, because if you know what you want to invest in and you see a pullback, that is the perfect opportunity for you to come in and buy at a discounted price, because the investors that make the most money are the ones that don't just follow the crowd. It's not the people that just follow the masses and start running away when things go down. It's the investors that go against the grain and they start buying when everybody starts panicking. We've already seen a lot of volatility up and down because of this variant alone. And so you can expect that this volatility is going to continue as we start to understand how bad this variant is, how much it is spread, and how fearful countries and businesses are of this variant. So this is something you want to keep in mind, because as we see more volatility, you need to know to keep the emotion out and remember to invest on financials. Now let's talk about lockdowns and how this variant could potentially affect the economy. Now there is a chance that we could see some more restrictions on the economy. Is it likely that we're going to see another full-on lockdown because of this variant? Probably not, but you do have people around the world that are now protesting because they don't want to see another lockdown. They don't want to see more restrictions. People are fed up with this pandemic. Countries in Europe have already imposed some restrictions because of this variant, and this has caused many people to start protesting, and it's even led to violence in Europe because people don't want to have these restrictions again. Now, politics aside, what is the effect of these lockdowns? So if we focus here on the United States, are we going to see another full-on lockdown? Probably not. I mean, the chances of that happening are pretty low. So let's just assume that they don't happen. I mean, if they do happen, then you would see a repeat of what we saw happen in 2020. You'd see a whole bunch of money printing. You'd see just a bunch of craziness happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Is it possible? Sure. I guess the possibility is higher than 0%, but is it likely? Probably not. What we will see happen, and what we already are seeing happen, is we are going to start to see more travel restrictions. We already see some travel restrictions to South Africa and a few other countries. We could see some more travel restrictions imposed. Plus, anytime you see more of these restrictions, people tend to get more scared. This is what we saw happen in 2021 and 2020. And when people get more scared, they're less likely to go out. They're less likely to go and spend money. They're less likely to go and live their lives because they're scared about this pandemic. This is just what we've seen happen. So these type of restrictions mean that, one, it's going to hurt travel companies, airline companies, cruise companies, restaurant companies. All these companies rely on foreign travel, people coming to the United States, people from the United States going out to eat. And so all these companies are probably going to be impacted because now they're going to have less business again. The reason why this is so important to understand is because it finally looked like we were going back to normal, especially when it came to travel. Thanksgiving weekend was the busiest weekend yet for people traveling during this pandemic. I mean, it was essentially like this pandemic didn't exist. So finally, all of these companies felt like things were going back to normal. And now, here we go back with these restrictions. Now, this has created some controversy because the Biden administration has created some travel restrictions to countries in Africa. And obviously, nobody's going to be happy anytime you do any decision when you're the president. Doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. But people were unhappy. They said that he took too long to make this decision. And then President Biden came out and said that it's going to take at least a couple weeks to understand this new variant and understand how bad it is, how contagious it is, and what we need to really do about it, and understand what we need to do here in the United States to protect the people about it. And then you have the countries in Africa that are suffering because of these travel restrictions, saying that these countries have Afrophobia. that they're not scared about the virus, they just don't want to deal with these countries in Africa, and because of that, they've created these travel restrictions, which are now hurting these countries in Africa because the people in the United States and these other countries around the world don't go to South Africa and these other countries. Well, now these countries in Africa are going to lose business, they're going to lose travelers, and they're going to lose money. So the concern in America is not, are we going to see another full-on lockdown? Because the chances of that happening are very little. If that happened, it would be pretty bad. But if that does not happen, which is probably not going to happen, if we don't see a full-on lockdown, the other concern is, okay, one, we're going to see all these travel-related companies get hurt again. And second, we also have the supply chain issues. Right now in 2021, we're facing one of the biggest supply chain messes in the history of time, where we have companies that are struggling to produce products because they cannot source products from overseas, or they cannot source their manufacturing from products overseas because these companies overseas are so backed up and these ports are backed up. And so you have all these delays in the supply chain because of previous delays and previous restrictions that we've seen. And so now if we see more restrictions happen on countries overseas, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, well, now that could create even more issues in our supply chain, because now all of a sudden you could see more manufacturing plants shut down. You could see more companies overseas shut down. And that means that now these countries in the United States, which are already struggling to source products from overseas, would be struggling even more, because now it goes back to what we saw happen before. You try to order products overseas, but nobody's producing products, which creates even more backlog, even more supply chain issues, which means even more price hikes. If you enjoyed this video, here's the video on stock market investing that I think you'll love. And while you're at it, download our free money management PDF. And as always, keep hustling. But in the long run, what really affects the stock's price is its fundamentals. That's how much money is the company making, how are their profits looking, are their revenues growing, are their profits growing, how is the management, and are they innovating for the future? So these are the things that really affect the company's stock price over the long term.